Now that we understand exactly why the original settlers came to the United States, we're going to start looking at the foundation of the various colonies in America and some of the reasons they were started. We already looked at the foundation of Massachusetts Bay as well as Virginia. So what we're going to look at today are some of the other colonies that were founded. We'll start with Rhode Island. You should already remember that Rhode Island was founded by Roger Williams, and this all stems back because of his belief in the separation of church and state. So we do consider him an early champion of religious freedom. When he gets there, he is going to peaceably get this land from the Indians rather than just take it like some of the other settlers had done when they arrived in the New World. And remember, when he bases his colony, it's all going to be founded on these various principles and religious freedoms that he believed in, specifically that the church and government should be separate. Remember, this is not for the sake of the government. We're not worried about the church influencing the government. This was all about the sake of the church. He was very afraid that the government would corrupt the church, and he did not want to allow that to happen. Connecticut is going to be founded by Thomas Hooker. Again, we see that they were looking for more religious freedoms than Massachusetts Bay allowed. Remember, Massachusetts was very rigidly controlled by the Puritans, and their government was very close to their Puritan beliefs. So they wanted to have a little bit more freedom than that, and did not like the fact that in order to be a citizen in Massachusetts, the people there actually had to be church members. That meant in Massachusetts, if you were not a church member, you cannot participate in their government in any way. So in Connecticut, they are going to move away from that and try to relax that a little bit. You will see the foundation of what's called the Fundamental Orders, which is the first constitution in the United States and the first written constitution, laying out a set of rules and laws for that particular colony that will function on how it operates. This again will be the foundation. A lot of what we see in these original colonies will go on to form the foundation of how our government in the United States will be formed later. Pennsylvania is interesting. It is found by a man named William Penn. He was a Quaker, and the Quaker religion was different from the Puritans or Catholics in that they practiced and worshiped without ministers. That means that they would all come together and sit in a room, and when someone felt led to share something, they would. They were also pacifists, meaning they did not believe in war or in fighting. So that should tell you more about their relationship with the Indians, but you should also know that they believed that everyone was equal. All people, men and women, were equal, as well as Indians, African Americans. All people were equal in the eyes of the Quakers. So again, that should tell you about how the Quakers governed their colony and also dealt with other people around them. Philadelphia comes to be known as the city of brotherly love. Again, just highlighting how they were those pacifists and tried to contribute in a positive way with the people that were around them. Obviously believing in the fair treatment of Indians, and this will become a thriving colony because it was so open to all of those around them, and their relationships were very good with one another and those who came into their colony. Maryland was founded by Lord Baltimore or George Calvert. This was established as a safe haven for English Catholics. Remember, in Great Britain, Henry VIII is going to form the Anglican Church, and then there begins the persecution of those Catholics who were left in England. So when Maryland is formed, George Calvert was looking to try to make sure they had a safe place to practice their religion. Unfortunately for those Catholics, in Maryland, they were very soon outnumbered by other Protestants. So they're going to write a law called the Toleration Act. And this act is going to guarantee religious freedom. But again, it is not to protect the religious freedom of everyone. It was actually originally designed to protect the Catholics in that colony because they had become outnumbered so very quickly, and they wanted to make sure that they would be able to practice their Catholicism without being persecuted there in that colony. Carolina, or what later becomes North and South Carolina, was a royal colony, meaning that they got their charter from the royal um, leadership of Great Britain. It was named after King Charles. Charlestown, or what later becomes known as Charleston, is a major port city. There really weren't very many of these major port cities, or really as many major cities in the South compared to what we see in New England. But Charlestown and later Charleston becomes a major port city for this region. And this is also going to allow them to ship out those major products. They had very large slave populations, and that was mostly because of their cash crops that they grew there. Their main cash crops at this point in time were very labor intensive, meaning they had to have a big labor force in order to work these crops. Those major ones that they grew at this point in time at the foundation of the colonies were rice, indigo, and tobacco. So those three right there are going to be key, and this is going to require that they bring in a very large slave population in order to accommodate those crops. It was originally created as a refuge for the poor and dissenters. Now, the poor, that's a pretty obvious one. We know that a lot of times in Great Britain, if someone could not pay their debt, they were actually sent to prison. So instead of leaving them in prison in Great Britain, what a lot of times they would do is they would ship them to the colonies. This was oftentimes seen as a punishment, but many who came to these colonies found that to actually be an opportunity. And dissenters are people, again, just like Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson were religious dissenters with the Puritans. That's what a dissenter is. Somebody who is going to just speak out against that mainstream religion. This is not going to become very populated. In fact, it remains very sparsely populated until the mid-1700s. And again, that's also partly based on that agricultural lifestyle that was in the southern colonies. There just weren't many large cities. Other colonies that were originals are going to be Georgia, which was founded by James Oglethorpe, and this was originally founded as a haven for debtors. Again, just like Carolina was where the poor would go, Georgia was kind of the same idea. It was also for criminals. Those who had broken a law in Great Britain were sometimes, again, punished by sending them here to the United States. In fact, crimes as simple as killing deer on a noble's land could be punishable by death, but in some cases they would waive that punishment in order to send them to the colonies, in this case, Georgia. That also explains to you why Georgia was used as a buffer from the Spanish South. The Spanish at this point controlled the Southwest and what is now Florida. So this was seen as a buffer from those areas, again, to kind of protect the rest of the colonists from the Spanish. New Hampshire and Maine were both founded by Puritan communities. Once again, we see a lot of that in the New England area. New Hampshire eventually becomes a royal colony, meaning it was controlled by the crown, while Maine is going to eventually be sold to Massachusetts and remains a part of Massachusetts until 1820 with the 1820 Compromise, or Missouri Compromise is what it becomes known as. So when you look on a map, even though Massachusetts and Maine are not geographically next to each other, they were controlled by the same group until 1820.